Hong Kong for the last generation.
I'm BaconMarshall.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations with
I
that
realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Good morning. You are listening to Backfire. This is Daniel Brantley in the stead of Steve Hickson. With me here we have John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hey, Daniel.
All going well? What's the word on the street, as they say?
Dove season's open.
Dove season is open.
Well, John's got that glazed look in his eye. It comes around once a year.
Good shoot Monday.
Very good, very good. And hey, what about the UT Vols, huh?
Well, could have been worse.
They accidentally won.
Accidentally won?
It was an accident. Yeah.
Could have been worse, but we shall see.
Yep.
I think we'll learn a lot more this week.
Well, you know, I'm forced. My son's playing for Bethel University, so I'm forced to keep up with the NAIA schedules.
They started this past week?
No, they started actually 2 weeks ago.
And how they doing?
They've won both games.
Oh,
This past week, they actually weren't. The team they were playing was a nationally ranked team. They weren't supposed to win.
Wow.
They actually won bigger than the score indicates, 34-32. The funny thing, though, is they had a play, and they ran the play by the refs on the front end and told them what it was and asked if it was legal, and the ref said it was legal.
Yeah.
So the other team's down on about the 3-yard line, and they're going to kick a field goal, and one of our guys jumps completely over the line. Now, he doesn't jump off of the center, doesn't touch the center, blocks the field goal attempt. He's all jubilant. They throw a flag. They talk, and finally the ref comes back and says, the call is leaping. Now, we've yet to figure out where leaping is in any of this, but they didn't allow it because they said he leaped.
Now you know, kids, no leaping in football.
That's right.
Apparently.
Well, you know, last couple weeks, we've talked about having issues with TDEC on the septic permit offices. And they were all riled up to send a letter asking them to...
Well, 4 of them were riled up to send a letter last night.
4 of them were riled up to send a letter to cut top staff positions and shift funds to aid local septic permit offices. But then the mayor
got very upset. We wouldn't want any government employee to lose a job, apparently.
So it sounds like, John, you are disagreeing with the mayor's stance?
Well, I mean, I think in the letter it states there's like, 8 or 10 people earning over $150,000 a year in the state office.
Wow.
That doesn't seem to be able to do anything. Now, locally, from what I understand, the guy locally works really, really hard and is overworked and doesn't have the support he needs. But you got 8 people back in Nashville making $150,000 a year. That's over $1 million a year in, I guess, they're certainly not people who are getting their hands dirty out in the field.
It's a lot of money, though, to sit behind a desk.
And apparently at the commission meeting, several commissioners said they couldn't vote for it because the state might retaliate.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things the mayor said, right? We have to deal with the state on everything we do. It affects a lot of things we do.
So in other words, we don't care whether it's right or wrong. We only care about, apparently... That's the kind of statement where you go, you know, I could probably carve a commissioner or a county mayor out of a banana with more spine. Sorry, that's a steal from Teddy Roosevelt.
That's pretty clever.
Blunt.
Well, I mean, think about that. You voice in a meeting, hey, we're not even talking about whether this is right or wrong. We don't want to do it because we might make them mad and then they might punish us. Is that really what American government has become?
No, John, but it's the philosophy that I follow in our radio show every morning.
Is that it?
I try not to make you mad.
Okay.
But it is kind of a tricky thing because was the mayor saying that to protect county money for himself or for the citizens? Because, I mean, if there is going to be retribution, it's going to affect a lot more than just the county commission.
Yeah, but at what point do we do what's right?
Agreed.
I mean, do we go to church on Sundays? You know, this is
Yes.
a very strong Christian community. Do we go to church and we go, well, do the right thing unless, of course, you know, it might come back to bite you or it might be difficult.
Yeah.
Hey, Daniel, you know, go in the lion's den unless, of course, the lions might actually eat you. And then
Yeah.
it's okay to throw your principles aside.
Yeah. And I've got friends who have talked about the only way that there will be big changes like on abortion and stuff like that is if a state just stands up and says, you know what, we're not going to take federal funds. We're saying no. We're done with it.
Well, you
That's
have
a big
had
deal.
people that actually did the right thing. I remember in the Hurricane Katrina era, there was a town or a county somewhere out in, I don't remember, it was out west, Idaho or that area, Montana. And they had the federal government had appropriated apparently a pretty substantial millions of dollars for a bridge that they didn't really feel was completely necessary. That local community voted not to accept the funds. And now keep in mind, this is a purely righteous stand on their part because they really didn't have the authority to do what they asked. But they asked that the government take that money instead and spend it in the ravaged areas of Louisiana and Mississippi to help those people. Now, I'm sure the federal government didn't actually do it. But my point is, there's a local community that did what was right.
Yeah.
You know, they did the right thing.
It's impressive. Yeah. Well,
Franklin, you're awful quiet.
Well, I'm all for good government and effective government, but I don't know much about this particular story because I didn't read it. So
not a problem. Well, in
But
other
the vote was 10 against and 4 in favor.
yeah. Now,
Jeff
was it that
Yarber
way?
brought that forward. Jeff is the one that was fighting. And I think, you know, Jeff's district is a working class district in town. And you're looking at multiple people on a state agency that's not apparently able to function because they won't support the local guy strong enough, making over $150,000 a year when you're representing working class people, and nobody wants to say that that's wrong.
That's wrong.
yay, Daniel.
Thank you.
Now, keep in mind, I want to stress this. From what I understand, the gentleman that does the work, the actual hands-on field work, is completely overworked and undersupported, and a good, competent, professional guy trying to do his job. But he doesn't have the support that he needs.
Makes it difficult. Well, speaking of good guys doing hard work in hard situations, Ed Elkins is stepping down as the SPCA president.
That's definitely hard work
Yes, it is.
around here.
Especially when you balance it with the reward that you get.
Yes, I think.
What was that? Some coffee or something? He got one.
No,
there?
I'm
Like
thinking
us?
more about the kicks and the fights and the.
I think what's probably most impressive about his tenure is that we haven't talked about the SPCA in about 2 months.
That's pretty amazing, actually.
Well, you know, here's to Ed. He's living out the adage that no good deed goes unpunished. So,
Yeah, definitely. And he was with them for 2 years. Said he'd give him one, and gave him an extra. So that was pretty kind of him.
I will say this, and this doesn't apply just to Ed or the SPCA. There's all kinds of organizations in Cleveland and Bradley County that are supported by volunteer boards who don't get paid anything.
That's true.
I know John does the Bradley County Nursing Home Board, has done it for a long time. When you do that, you're really making a commitment, and there's a lot more time investment than anybody would ever think in order to do the job right. And everybody who serves in those capacities deserves a real pat on the back. And
How about a round of applause?
yeah, that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't know it was going to start that loud.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
There you go. The studio audience agreed.
Yeah, Backfire's filmed in front of a live studio audience. Those were the days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there's also some good news that Cleveland is, according to Smart Asset, the second least affected city
Affected
in
city,
Tennessee.
second least effective.
Affected
Okay.
a city by inflation in Tennessee. The power of money in Cleveland from 2005 to 2015, purchasing power of money went up 19.17%, while the average cost of living only increased 1.36%.
That's pretty good run
Yeah.
right there.
And
We are blessed.
Cleveland had the largest average change in personal income in the state with an increase of 3.07%. Not
Well,
bad.
I would
That is
assume
very
that
good
the,
news.
that the
And what's really important there is the income percentage was up higher than the inflationary percentage.
I was going to say, I
more
assume
than
the
double.
inflation is, I can't imagine inflation being different in this kind of pocket locale.
Yeah.
So that's probably much more standardized for the area and the region. So the real player there is the fact that the income has gone up.
And now the secret is, how do we keep it going?
Well, that's actually an interesting discussion, twofold. Do you want to keep it going? Because this idea that you grow, as someone who grew up in Cleveland, I can tell you used to be able to pull out on Ocoee Street without, even thinking
Looking
about
either
it.
way.
There's a rush hour now, and that's a huge change for a town like Cleveland, and I'm not against it,
Sure.
but at some point you do have to discuss, because there are changes in quality of life as well, or the type of lifestyle.
Yeah.
So do we want to continue it? And the hard thing, if you say you don't want to continue it, is it's very difficult to just maintain.
Yeah.
Generally, you're either going up or you're going down.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see some more growth. The work that's being done out on the bypass out there, that's going to produce some significant economic growth over time. You probably have seen a fair number of construction type jobs out there over the last year or two. Some of those would be out of towners, of course, but some of them locally. But the infrastructure that's being put in is for development, and that's what's going to happen. So you're going to see more growth.
Assuming that the UAW doesn't kill Volkswagen, you'll see some new growth there, and that will probably lead to our industrial park, because from what I understand, that's really kind of the idea there anyway. They needed to be within a certain distance from the VW plant. So, like I said, assuming that the progressives and the unions and the National Labor Relations Board that Obama has stacked don't actually kill Volkswagen, we'll probably see some growth.
Well, I did not bring an article in here about this, but you mentioned Volkswagen. There's another company, I want to say Mitsubishi, who recently got in some big trouble about their car's mileage
Well,
ability.
there's actually about 3 or 4 of them that are all involved in that.
Oh, yeah.
VW was the, and I don't really think VW was the largest one. I think VW was the first one that got kind of caught. And the others have skated under the radar a little bit, protected by the scandal VW generated.
Well, I think VW is now the second or third largest car manufacturer in the world.
But
But
they're going to be a target.
But they've seen sales slide too. Actually,
Understandably.
auto sales in August dropped nationwide.
Sure. I mean, any business like that has to travel to a certain extent on credibility with the public, and that's a huge blow to your credibility when that happens.
Well,
you
yes
got to
and no,
rebuild
but-
that trust.
But if you remember, the one of the takeaways from those headlines is VW lied in order to give you more power and better mileage. Now think about that for a minute. The government is fighting them, folks, because they wanted to make their cars more powerful and more fuel efficient.
It usually goes the other way. I thought I'd been tricked the other way when I had a Dodge pickup truck that I measured and it only got 15 miles to the gallon. I thought, there's no way. I got to do something to fix this. Looked it up online, and it should average 15 miles per gallon. So then I got rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Interesting, more of those car companies. Well, I saw an interesting story. This is out of Hamilton County, actually, but there's a sheriff's deputy in 2010 out of White. He was in White County and had charges, child sex charges. They got dropped because they didn't have proof. And now the same thing has happened in Hamilton County. And he was indicted on 6 counts.
Same guy?
Same guy.
I mean, Hamilton County hired him?
Hamilton County hired him, yes, as a
Have
sheriff's
they
deputy.
commented on whether they were aware of it or not? I don't know that.
Yeah, with the Sheriff Jim Hammond said Spalding was suspended while the case was going on in White County. So I guess he was hired while that case was still going on. But then he said with the charges dismissed for lack of proof, we're obligated to take them back. There are 2 alleged...
Well, White County may have been obligated to take you back. Hamilton wasn't obligated to hire him.
I don't know.
I think
he was already at Hamilton,
employed,
and they
suspended him
Okay.
while he was under
in Hamilton.
charges, and then
In
those
White.
charges were dismissed.
Right. So he worked for Hamilton.
Yeah.
The charges are filed in White County, and Hamilton suspended him.
Yeah,
Well,
and then he's been in trouble with it again.
And
there's a
I think it's a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking
Yeah, I
to go
agree.
back and
That's true.
and criticize them for that decision.
Yeah, I'll enter into the same type of concept on the coach at the Udawal rape case. Everything I've heard is he is a good man who was trying to do a good job. And when I look at that and I look at the charges that were filed against him, he called authorities as soon as that boy was out of immediate jeopardy in the hospital. You know, he took him to the ER. They apparently immediately began surgery on him. He stayed with him, and later that same morning he called. I really think that's a pretty... I mean, think about it. What if he had just put him in the ambulance and walked off and called, but didn't go to the hospital, didn't check on him, didn't stay with him?
I'm actually leaning towards your side on this one, but I think the issue is slightly different. I think the issue is who he called, not whether he called. Now, I will tell you there may be some ambiguity in the law in that. They're saying he didn't call the authorities. He's saying, well, I called my supervisor, basically, is who he reported it to, as opposed to
the police
or Child Protective Services or somebody like that. That's the issue for the prosecution.
Well,
but it's,
if I were a part of the defense, one of the things I would want to know is what is the training in Hamilton County schools? Is there a chain of command, and are they taught in that instance to follow the chain of command, or is there a protocol that says here's where you veer off the chain of command? I just personally think he's being scapegoated somewhat. Although I'm completely happy these boys have gotten apparently pretty substantial charges, like they should have for what they actually did.
Whether or not, it's not part of the criminal charge, whether or not he was aware that there was a culture of bullying going on in the program amongst these boys is a different question.
Yeah.
But that has to do with fitness for the job,
but we
not
said
criminal
this at
prosecution.
the time, though, too, Franklin. There's been a culture of bullying since the beginning of time. When you and I were in school, there was bullying, but
it didn't go to that level.
Take a broom handle and sodomize a fellow student. Of course, they didn't bring guns to school and shoot each other either.
They did bring guns
and the problem
to school,
with all of this is we want to discuss these issues, but we don't want to discuss the overarching issue of what have we done to our culture to produce this type of animals that we're producing. That's an uncomfortable conversation, so we just dance around that conversation.
Yeah, it's tough when you're doing behavior modification when you really need to get to the heart of the issue is what's kind of causing it. And it's a very difficult thing to do.
I would have to think the penalties being imposed on those young men are probably pretty stark messages to young people about what's acceptable behavior and what's not.
Yeah, but those penalties would have been assessed on someone 10 times worse 50, 60 years ago had they done that. The point is, what have we done as a culture to cultivate this kind of narcissistic, I can do whatever I want to attitude? It's a self-indulgent, it's all about me and I get to do whatever, pops into my head, no restraint.
Well, I can remember hearing some pretty extreme stories about fraternity rushes and so forth when I was in college a long time ago. I don't know that it's necessarily...
I don't remember any stories about sodomizing people.
I'll spare some of the details.
Thank you, Franklin.
Well, maybe, I was Kappa Sig. Maybe you were a different fraternity.
I wasn't in a fraternity,
Franklin.
actually, John.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess there's nothing new under the sun, but
No, but there's new acceptance under the sun. That's
sure.
my point.
Sure.
There's nothing new under the sun. This has been with us since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
The problem is we used to have enough sense as a culture to value certain things higher than others. Well, now we're in a culture where we tell everybody whatever you want to do goes.
We also had a culture for a long time that swept a lot of things under the rug, and you didn't hear about them.
Like what, Frank?
No, I'm just saying, particularly in the area of something like this scandal that happened in Ooltewah, lots of things happened that people just decided they weren't going to talk about.
That's true. I mean, that's why they sent off their pregnant teens, right?
Sure.
Bring them back when the
Well,
baby's born.
the fact of the matter is you can trace the rise of most all of this back to the early 70s when we had rulings where the Supreme Court took the Bible out of the classroom. They took morality and ethics out of classrooms. We started down this sexual liberation movement where everybody is entitled to do whatever they want, and there are consequences. And this is the culture we live in now.
Like a culture that reported this week that teen pregnancy rates in Tennessee are down 40% in the last 10 years.
You're right. They're down, and you're right. I read that, Franklin, and
Well,
that is an argument to say the condoms in the schools have made a difference. The problem is, before we open the floodgates of immorality, you didn't need the condoms in schools.
Yeah,
So a problem was
we sent our
created,
kids
and you're
off
right.
to another
Now
town to have those children.
Yeah, and you know what? Other children saw that child have to leave town and didn't want that, and they actually controlled their bodies. They actually
Did
made
they?
a decision not to risk
Did they?
unwanted pregnancies.
You know,
At least not in the numbers that we
well,
have.
for somebody
now.
who's staunchly pro-life, the abortion rate is also down dramatically over that period of time.
From a high, Franklin, that's like that's you all do that all the time. It's down from a ridiculous high. We still abort hundreds of thousands of babies a year.
That's not the point, John. The point is you're arguing for glory days gone by when we were
They don't
all
have
moral.
to be gone by. They
And
don't.
I'm
They
saying
don't. I'm saying
the
they don't have to
evidence
be gone by.
doesn't support that concept.
They don't have to be gone by. They don't have to
The
be.
point
Franklin.
is they may not have existed the way you remember them. Period. By definition, when we
Well,
say
there
that,
you go,
they were a
folks.
lot higher then.
According to Franklin and the progressives, you can't control your own body. You
Nobody
can't
said
hold
that.
yourself to a higher standard. You can't have morals and ethics that you actually choose to live
No,
by.
what I'm saying to you is if you talk about how ridiculously high the abortion rate
There's-
was 30 years ago, and then at the same time pine for the morality we had 30 years ago.
Not 30
something
years
doesn't
ago,
add up
50
there.
years ago, Franklin. 30 years ago is when you and your progressives started cramming immorality down our throats.
Well, you don't remember 50 years ago either.
I can see the statistics from 50 years ago. Since the Roe versus Wade decision, 40 million black children have been murdered by abortion. That's 40 million black children who would be living, voting Americans. So the black community has slavishly given their votes to the Democrat Party that has participated in the abortion industry that has murdered 40 million black Americans. So, folks, if you want to continue keep voting Democrat.
How many white Americans?
Well,
would
I'm
you
just,
think had
no,
abortion?
you're right, more than that.
More than that.
Well, as we were on the topic of things like this, did you see the former Stanford University swimmer who'd raped that passed out drunk lady? Got 3 months, and now he is free.
Which is a shame. It's again, it's a reflection of our culture and what we value or don't value.
Do you suspect that this kind of light sentence? I mean, people were pretty outraged when he was given a 6 month, and then he had it cut in half. Is that what leads to some of the behavior we're seeing?
Absolutely. I mean, what does that say to someone? What does that say to the next drunk boy that walks by someone passed out, or girl for that matter?
Strange world. I also saw an interesting article. A lady in Salem, Massachusetts was convicted of withholding chemotherapy from her son. Now, this happened a few years ago, She pled not guilty in 2009 after her son died. But she said that he stopped giving the chemo to him because it was making him so sick.
So it wasn't a religious.
No, she just
decision?
didn't like seeing her son kind of suffer from the medicine.
Well, the problem is that gets into a really bigger question, especially with a child like that. Does the government step in and say that the parent's wrong? You
That's
know,
a good question.
who is responsible for raising our children?
Yeah.
Us or the government? And I don't know. I'm not positing an opinion.
Yeah, that's why I kind of brought it up. It's a big question. Is it more American to allow a mother to do that kind of thing?
Well,
I don't think you can equate it to immunization. This seems on a totally different scale. But is it her right to do that, or does she have an obligation to do all that is medically possible to protect her son?
Well, and two, we don't know what the medical advice was. Was it a completely curable situation with the chemotherapy?
And it doesn't say
was
that.
it a 90% success or a 10% success? And two, I mean, that's a terrible tragedy for any parent to have to be in a position to have to make a decision like that.
Yeah, it's hard. Franklin, what are your thoughts on that? Do the parents have rights there, or an obligation, or both, or is it a? I know it's a sticky
legally,
situation.
we have taken the position over the years, in particularly some of the Christian Scientist cases who oppose any medical intervention at all, that the government could step in and force medical treatment in cases where doctors felt it was absolutely essential, that the child has some rights too in that circumstance.
The problem is, and
I think John's analysis on what he said about that one's probably spot on right, that we don't know enough about it to really comment on that.
And you'd have to admit, Franklin, the problem is, where does the government draw the line between liberty and essential protection of innocence?
I would agree with you, John, that in virtually every debate you and I have, even when we get kind of crazy in here sometimes, we're really having a debate about where to draw lines most of the time. And it's a spectrum, and there are polar opposites to it, but there's a lot of room in the middle between those two, and we're arguing about where.
The real problem,
not whether, but where.
For me, one of the real problems is a lot of times making sure you keep in mind the motivation. Because what happens in a case like this is people have a tendency to just assume that the government official is motivated by the right thing. Well, you know what? Power is always a corrupting influence. And so sometimes the government official just doesn't agree. There's not really a right or wrong answer. And so the government official says, well, I think it's this, and I'm going to force that on you. And that's not always the case. So the government committee or official or rule is not always the above board position as well. You know, there's gray areas on both sides.
Look at a case like, if you remember the Terry Schiavo case. Talk about an area with a huge amount of gray area in between that you're arguing about whether to draw those lines. You know, there were so many issues there. One, you've got people who are opposed to ever.
But you had a fight among the family.
You have a fight
itself.
amongst family who disagreed with each other. Who ought to be the one making those decisions?
But then there was the argument of who made it. The husband that the parents didn't trust.
I understand. But I'm saying that's a perfect example, though. So many of the things that we argue about, in spite of the moral certainty that John and I bring to our position sometimes, really have a whole lot more gray in them than we would comfortably like to admit.
And I tell you, the hard thing, too, is a lot of times you can end up at a position that in the context of the individual case you're discussing may seem harsh. But sure. You may be looking at it from a broader philosophical look. Sure. In the long run, this
John
is
just joined the ACLU, I think.
No,
same concept, though.
Yeah, but the Terry Schiavo case, for example, I can say I don't think we should have done that. And someone says, look at her life, look at her vegetative state, look how terrible that is. I said, I know, but the problem is I'm looking at the Down syndrome child. Do you extrapolate that out and say, well, I don't think that's a good life, so we're going to terminate that? So sometimes it's hard to move away from the example in the moment and look at the broader context of things.
Very good. Well, I apologize to our listeners who are expecting a loud and furious beginning. We will try to get there in the next half. Thank you to the Fly, who is keeping us company in here. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need today is waiting for you at Check Into Cash. It's your money, so come in and get it.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check Into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
The cash you need is right here, so stop worrying and stop in to Check Into Cash today.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
At Buy Here, Pay Here USA, we pay the most because we buy the best. And we make selling your car to us as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, bring your car, truck, or SUV to one of our stores. 2, we'll give you a free appraisal with no obligation. 3, sell us your car. It's that easy. At Buy Here, Pay Here USA, we buy the best. We sell the best and we pay the most. Visit us in Cleveland, Dayton, or Chattanooga, or go to buyheresellhere.com. That's buyheresellhere.com. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
This is Teresa Gilbert from the Village Bake Shop in Cleveland, Tennessee. Do you have a birthday, wedding, or anniversary coming up and want that perfect cake? Need some donuts to sweeten up your coworkers? Want to surprise your sweet thing with a bag of cookies? Then come on over to the Village Bake Shop. Family operated since 1961, the Village Bake Shop is your first and last stop for fresh baked goods that will feed your sweet tooth. The Village Bake Shop located at the Village Green Town Center. The phone number here is 423-476-5179. See you soon.
It's me, it's Fro Daddy, saying tune in to the Fro Daddy Show Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Local news, national blues, and a lot of stuff you just can't use. In Cleveland, Tennessee at 99.9 FM and around the world in a daze at WOOPFM.com. I might even play your requests, so call me. And if you see WOOP on your caller ID, you better answer the phone, because I won't leave you alone. Fro Daddy.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
Dr. Christopher Chase, with associates in plastic surgery, now offers his patients the convenience of a Cleveland office at 2350 North Ocoee Street. Dr. Chase specializes for the ladies in breast augmentation, including lifts, reconstructions, and reductions. Also, tummy tucks or mommy makeovers, and facial rejuvenation, including facelifts, eyelids, brows, nose, and he also offers Botox procedures. Check out Dr. Christopher Chase. He is certified by the American American Board of Surgery, the American Board of Plastic Surgery. He's a member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Check their website out at aprs.md. That's aprs.md. Call for your convenient appointment in Cleveland at 624-0021. 624-0021. 2350 North Ocoee. That's Dr. Christopher Chase.
Train engineers put our heating and cooling products through almost every test imaginable. So while you're sending your kids to school, they're sending 10,000 volts through a compressor. Testing like this is the reason Train is so reliable, and why our engineers prefer their steaks. Well done.
Ready to indulge in Train comfort? Call the Train Comfort Specialist at Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. High-quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a train. Really hard.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
We are back. Steve is not back at the moment. As he is usually the moderator of Backfire, I thought it would make sense for us to talk about the moderators of the presidential debates. For those who don't know, Lester Holt, Martha Raddatz, Anderson Cooper, and Chris Wallace are going to be moderating the 3 presidential debates. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns about any of them?
As a Republican, I think it's a failure on the RNC's part to get non-biased participants. A couple of them are donors to the Clinton Foundation, donors to Barack Obama's campaign. They've clearly been favorable to one over the other. So, I think once again the Democrats come out in pretty good shape with these moderators.
I have not seen any articles stating that Trump is threatening to not come to
No, there's actually been statements that he will be in all 3 of them. There's also a forum. I'm not sure what the difference is. Matt Lauer is going to do. Lauer is clearly not a Trump supporter, clearly a Clinton supporter.
Sometime this week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Coming up.
I think that's
Or next
inappropriate.
week.
Of course, part of the problem here is
it's a voluntary forum, isn't it?
It's hard to find journalists anymore that understand the difference between news reporting and editorializing. Now, I personally think Chris Wallace has been pretty hard on everybody. If you watch his show, nobody comes on his show on Sunday morning that doesn't get asked some pretty tough questions. Yeah. So I'm okay with him. Martha Raddatz is an aggressive questioner. The problem is she's got some, from what I understand, some donation records that would worry me as a Republican.
Franklin, you kosher with all of them?
I'm not overly concerned with who the moderators are anytime. I think president's going to have to deal with much more stern tests than who asked them questions.
Yeah, but the problem is there's so many people hang on these. Franklin, in the 2012 campaign, the Crowley lady clearly allowed Obama to say something that factually wasn't true and didn't follow it up, didn't question it, allowed it to stand. And Mitt Romney probably suffered from that exchange.
Well, looks like after Trump went to Mexico and then gave his immigration speech in Arizona, there's kind of a mixed bag of opinions, but one of the articles I saw said that GOP Hispanics dump Trump.
No, I mean, he had a committee that he had put together. One person resigned. One of them said they weren't happy with the speech. And the thing about the speech is, if you actually look at what he said, there were several things he said in there that were pretty much what they wanted. But a lot of them mentioned they didn't like the tone of the speech. The tone was too harsh.
It was a difficult speech to interpret. At one point, he appeared to be saying that he was sticking with his original position to deport everybody. At another point, then he started talking about prioritizing, which sounded an awful lot like exactly what President Obama's current policy is.
Well, actually,
it wasn't clear to me what the conclusion was to take from that.
Actually, some of the provisions that they're most upset about, I saw one journalist had pulled a 1996 speech, I believe, that Bill Clinton gave as president, and it's virtually identical to what Trump is calling for now. Wow. He called for expulsion of people that were here in the country illegally. Every issue that they're now taking with Trump, Bill Clinton supported as president.
it was interesting to me that the United States Senator from Arizona, not McCain, the other one, Jeff Flake, strongly condemned the speech and the policies that he was promoting. And in a strange decision from an electoral standpoint, Trump immediately attacked Jeff Flake, called him a failed senator, threatened to work against him in the next election, which really didn't seem like smart politics.
No, I mean, there's plenty of unsmart politics here. I agree.
I will say this. I think Trump put himself into an awkward position by how strongly he advocated his positions early on, and then was getting tons of advice from people to walk them back a little bit, and it's hard to do.
Yeah.
I'm actually not criticizing him in that one. Sometimes, you can paint yourself into a corner, though, and that's kind of where he is on that issue.
But there are other issues floating out here. That one of the main points that the Clinton people have been hammering is that he's not presidential. Well, I'm sorry, folks. If you watched him on that podium with the Mexican president, he seemed completely presidential. He seemed measured and controlled. He actually seemed in command. The Mexican president seemed kind of at a loss in that. Now, the Mexican president attacked him later on Twitter, partly because he's flailing, and it looks like this gamble on his part from Mexican political standards was a loss for him.
Yeah, it didn't.
But I think it's probably a net gain for Trump. I think he looked good. I think he helped himself with that. By the way, the new polling, CNN poll, has Trump actually up 45 to 43 over Clinton. 92% of Democrats are backing Clinton, which has been one of the claims that they've had as an advantage. However, Trump has now hit 90% of Republicans, which just a few weeks ago he was at 80%.
That's a big leap.
The Republicans have coalesced. But here's the big takeaway. Independents give Trump a 49 to 29% advantage. So there's a 20-point advantage to Trump among independents.
Now, what has happened in the last week or two that has helped his poll numbers rise?
Well, one, he hadn't done anything bad, and two,
it's the Clinton Foundation.
More and more of this stuff,
email stuff.
Look, Hillary, there's no way around the fact that she has lied. She has lied multiple times about national security issues. We now know that the majority of the 13 devices that she used. Now, she's on record as saying she only used one. They've now located the identity, at least, of 13 devices, but they don't have the majority of them. One of them was lost in the mail, a laptop with all of her national security classified information on it, emails, was mailed, and that's supposedly the last time they saw it. So we have no idea where these are.
The wild-eyed liberal media hasn't been given this issue enough
Franklin,
attention.
are you comfortable?
That's John's argument.
Look, you can laugh and you can make a joke, which is always a good deflection. But are you comfortable with the fact that 13 devices, not one? Well, first off, just explain that. She went on record and said, I only used one device. The FBI has identified 13. Well, explain that.
I'm not explaining it because I have told you repeatedly that I think she exercised horrible judgment.
No, Franklin. That's the judgment on setting up the unsecured server. I'm asking you, she went on record and said, I only had one device. FBI says she had 13. Explain that.
I don't have an explanation.
Would saying that was a lie, would that maybe be accurate?
It's possible. It could also mean that she got a new device every 4 months.
She did. And by the way, Franklin, I'm not a computer expert.
It doesn't mean that there's 13 going at one time.
No, that's not the point, Franklin. Actually, there were at least 3 or 4 going at one time.
John,
because they testified. Well, let me ask you this. Do you know enough about computers to know that hitting it with a hammer doesn't secure the data on it?
I do know that.
Well, her actual testimony to the FBI was that some of her people hit them with hammers, and that's all that was done to them. Are you comfortable with a person claiming to be qualified to be president who doesn't know hitting them with a hammer doesn't secure the electronic data on it?
I would dare say there's a lot of people in the age bracket of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump who would have said that.
All right, let me ask you another question. Do you honestly believe, even though she's testified both ways, as a matter of fact, this week, she said that she fully understood classifications, but in her testimony to the FBI, she said she didn't know that the C at the top of the page indicated classified.
It doesn't indicate classified. It indicates a lower level called confidential.
Either one. She said she thought it was an alphabetical listing.
Maybe so, John.
All right, Franklin, does that sound like someone competent enough to be president of the United States? Because, by the way, Franklin, if you come to the conclusion that the C is an alphabetical listing, wouldn't you have noticed the A and the B and the D, which are not on any of the papers? How would you see a C and make the assumption it was alphabetical when there's no other alphabetical letter on top of the pages?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, your choices are incompetent or dishonest.
But I do know we're talking about roughly 15 emails out of 35,000.
But she said none. Did she go on record as saying there were none?
Well,
so is 15 more than none?
Depends on whether it's classified and confidential are the same thing.
Actually, classified at the highest level, Franklin. The FBI report states that. Classified at the highest level.
Okay.
The only explanation is she's either completely by the way, Franklin, as they fuss and say it's unreasonable to question her health, she actually threw a concussion and medical health up as an excuse for not remembering her classified briefings that she signed that she had. But now she says because of her brain injury, she couldn't remember those. But then if you ask about how bad her brain injury was or is, they say, oh, that's a ridiculous question to ask. Which is it? Is it a defense against perjury or is it ridiculous to ask? And by the way, we also know that they began destroying hard drives after subpoenas were issued. Now, Franklin, you're a lawyer. If you get notice that information is under a federal subpoena and you begin wiping hard drives with that evidence on it, is that a crime?
It could be.
So somebody in her orbit committed a crime, possibly? Is that
it's possible?
Right? Don't you
if
think?
If those prove to be the actual facts?
Well, we know they wiped. We know when
in
they
sequence
did it.
of events.
Well, I can give you the sequence. Do you want the dates? I'll be glad to give you the dates when the letters were sent, when the subpoenas were issued, and when the wiping started.
It's possible. Did you not hear?
Well, my point, Franklin, is you're still going to vote for this woman.
Given my alternative, yes.
Well, folks, there you have it.
Yes.
Lying,
yes,
cheating, stealing, perjury, none of that is, incompetence, brain damage, none of that stops Franklin from supporting Hillary Clinton.
Now, which one of those descriptions do you think does not apply to the Republican nominee? Maybe the brain damage one. I don't know about
committed perjury.
He has the greatest health in the history of the world.
You know, what happens is you want to draw these comparisons between a campaign promise that he may have gone back on and her lying to the FBI about national security. There's no comparison.
There is no comparison at all in terms of experience and demonstrated competence actually in the job. And in fact, she did a competent job as a senator. She did a competent job as Secretary of State.
So
we have actual evidence of that.
So let me make sure I understand.
We can't say that with respect to Donald Trump. You know, one of the most, we were talking about it earlier, one of the most conservative newspapers in the entire country yesterday said he was unfit to be president.
Well,
and they had supported every Republican going back to Goldwater, the Dallas Morning News, and then today they endorsed Hillary Clinton.
Well, look, I'm starting to buy into this whole Republican and Democrat establishment up there are concerned about the safety and security of the bureaucracy, and I think that's some of what you're seeing here.
Well, I would say be careful, John, because you're already seeing the fruits of that view with the inability already. Paul Ryan, it appears, is not going to be able to pass a budget this year, not because he can't work with Democrats, because he can't get the Republicans to vote on it.
But you know what the difference there is, Franklin? He's at least trying. The Democrats never even tried to pass a budget. When you all were in charge,
They
you never passed a budget. Never.
Can't even do the simplest task of government.
So why were you not upset when the Democrats weren't passing a budget?
I was.
And they weren't even talking about trying to pass a budget.
I was.
Paul Ryan is at least trying to talk about it.
I was.
By the way, Franklin,
which part
do you think a woman who testifies to the, or well, I can't say testifies because she also didn't get the standard treatment by the FBI. She got an not under oath interview instead of an actual sworn under oath interrogation. But what part of, what was it, 40 different times where she said, I don't remember, tells you that she's competent to be president? I don't remember. I don't remember. I don't remember. Oh, yeah, I signed a form saying I had security briefings, but I don't remember any of them. Is that competent? 40 I don't remembers?
Depends on the questions that are being asked, John.
Well, obviously, your standard for the president is much different than mine.
Well, you mentioned Hillary's health and stuff, and there's been a little bit of news about her coughing fit she had recently. Is this a sincere concern, and if not, when does health become a factor?
Well, I think the American people are entitled to know all about the health of the president's. I don't care who the nominee is. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Donald Trump.
Look, Dr. Carson said that. I tend to agree with Franklin about this, but the problem is his candidate won't do it. Carson said he thought both candidates ought to release their medical records so the American public can see, because both of them are elderly. The problem is you've got one with an admitted concussion and brain injury, and apparently some kind of blood clot in the brain, which, by the way, folks, the common usage term for that is a stroke, just so you know. A blood clot in the brain's a stroke.
I think they're talking about a hematoma, which is a different thing.
No, they said blood clot. They didn't say hematoma. They said blood clot. And by the way, Franklin, this is sort of her testimony to the FBI. Now, this is a quote. She did not pay attention. Now, those are her words. Did not pay attention to levels of classification when handling this information. And she asserted that it did not occur to her that discussions of drone strikes under a secret program operating in a sovereign territory of a U.S. ally might qualify as classified.
Because she said the information had already been public.
Drone strikes in a Franklin, that is please don't embarrass yourself.
I'm not
by
embarrassing
saying
myself.
You think
you're taking it out of
context.
Context. You're taking it out of context.
There is no context.
Yes, there is a context. The context that she gave and the explanation she gave on that was that those particular drone strikes had already been discussed publicly. So, therefore, that's what she said.
Franklin, mentioning a drone strike publicly and discussing the details of it are two separate things. Because guess what foreign adversaries want to know? They want to know the decision-making process, because that helps them predict future drone strikes. So the fact that you are willing to excuse someone asking to be president from saying, I didn't pay attention to whether it was classified or not when I discussed drone strikes is embarrassing for you.
That's not what she said.
It is what she said. She said, I did, this is her words, did not pay attention.
You got to read the whole thing, not just the little snippets you clip off.
Did not pay attention? There's a context that when you're discussing
the context is if it's already out in the public, it's not the same thing as when it's being kept secret.
Did not pay attention. If she had said, I purposely said that because it had been in public, that'd be one thing. You and I could have that discussion. What she said was, I did not pay attention. Those were her words. So, folks, think about that when you choose to vote for Hillary Clinton. This is someone who admitted she did not pay attention to national security thoughts.
This is someone who virtually the entire Republican national security apparatus for the last 30 years thinks is competent.
You mean the ones that just last week you were apoplectic about getting us into the Iraq War? Those people? The neocons that you hate?
I think it's interesting, John, that you've hopped off that pony.
So you're now supporting their people?
No.
You're supporting the person they support.
I'm just pointing out.
So the people that got us in the Iraq War that you blame
that's right.
are supporting Hillary, your person, and you're in bed with them.
What they have all said is, compared to
based
the
on
two,
their judgment. that you hate.
Okay, fine.
So you're in bed with the very
Fine,
people
John.
that you
Fine.
say killed millions.
Fine.
Just last week, you
Fine,
went
John.
apoplectic
That's
about
right.
killing millions of people.
That's right.
You're now recommending their advice.
I'm not recommending
Yes, you
anybody's
are. You're
advice.
supporting the same candidate.
I am supporting it. I just think it's fascinating that you have completely abandoned their views after you supported them for so
No,
long.
I didn't actually abandon their views.
Well, which is it?
Well, frankly, I'm not. You're missing the point. I'm not opposed to going into
all
Iraq.
they have said is that Donald Trump isn't qualified for the job.
And that she is.
Yeah.
So the very people that you blame for 1 million deaths and for the policies that led us into that, you now are in bed with.
Well, I didn't say they weren't qualified. I think they had bad judgment.
But you're taking their judgment on Hillary Clinton.
I'm not taking
You're in
their
bed
judgment.
with the
I'd
very
already made my
people.
own decision.
You're in bed with the very people that you
Okay.
vilified just a week ago.
It's the same reason that, there's not one living former economic advisor to a United States president, Democrat or Republican, who's supporting Donald Trump? Not one.
Well, actually, that's not true.
No, it is true.
Stockman is supporting him. Art Laffer is supporting him. That's not true, Franklin.
All right, running out of time here, but it looks like there's some interesting articles out there about hackers tipping an American election. Tech people say it's very possible, especially in states where there's no physical record of voting. Like we have here in Bradley County, my understanding is all we have is a digital record, and there's no physical, I guess, manifestation of every vote. How big a threat is this, do you fellas think?
I think the answer to that is none of us know.
That's true.
And, the problem is we've known this all along, that when you go to these digital systems, I know originally the system was digital, but it also had an internal paper roll that actually generated some of that data. Not all of them have that anymore, and that's always been a concern. We have, of course, this is Franklin's party's position is that voter fraud doesn't ever happen, so I guess they probably aren't worried about this at all. But we have cases where people showed it, they took video of it, where they punched the button for one candidate and the machine marked the other candidate. Yeah. Amazingly, they were always punching a Republican button and it was marking a Democrat candidate. But we have that's happened in the past, we know.
Yeah. It's bizarre. Yeah, I've seen YouTube videos that kind of,
people took videos of it where they punched the button and it marked the other candidate. But as I understand it, I know Indiana was one of the countries, one of the states that they've actually identified, and I believe the other one was it Arizona or?
I don't know what you're going to say.
Sure. No, that they have shown breaches, that some foreign entity has breached the election apparatus. I know Indiana was one of the states.
Yeah, I'd have to scan this whole thing.
Of course, according to Franklin, voter fraud doesn't happen, so we probably don't need to worry about that.
Well, and the Republican and Democratic federal judges have looked at it.
Looked at what?
Whether there was significant evidence of any voter fraud being a problem.
Well, they just found, I think it was, 2,000 or more people that are registered in Virginia and North Carolina. Matter of fact, Franklin, the worst case is Al Franken's case. Al Franken won in a contested election that the numbers actually bounced back and forth with a little over 300 votes. They identified close to 1,200 convicted felons who did not have the right to vote, who voted in that election. That is 3 times Al Franken's margin of victory. And Franklin doesn't think that's a problem. So a United States senator went to Washington in an election where we've identified just the one group, convicted felons who weren't allowed to vote.
As I recall, there was a recount in that race.
Franklin, after the recount was done, he won by 340-something votes. They identified close to 1,200 convicted felons who did not have the right to vote who voted. So that's 3 times Al Franken's margin of victory.
Who'd they vote for?
We don't know. Oh. The point is, you identified 3 times his margin of victory in that election. Most people would consider that a significant situation. But, of course, you all didn't because Al Franken was the winner.
Well,
and he's proven to be such a mental giant.
While Steve is not here, I would like to close this with a Hickson prediction. sent to me via The Wire. Steve predicts that there's no way that the machine, that's my word for it, would let Hillary Clinton lose, even if she loses. That there will either be, again, this is the Hickson prediction.
Well, actually, he's in line with George Soros. George Soros said he thought Trump would win the popular vote, but it didn't matter. They'd already established who the winner would be.
He says there will either be a radical Islamic flare-up, or Hillary will get sick all of a sudden. Something will happen. The election gets called off. Or
Well, let me just say in advance, irrespective of who wins the election, I'm sick to death of trying to delegitimize our elected officials. It's wrong. It's anti-American, and it does damage to our country.
Talking about?
Oh,
there's no way she could win, honestly, kind of thing.
Obama wasn't really an American. If this person wins, they didn't really get elected. It was rigged.
So are you
it's
also
doing damage
upset
to our
at
country.
the good liberal progressives that when someone like Phyllis Schlafly dies, says, great, Satan has called another one of his people home. I hope a pillow was involved. I hope someone actually killed her. Are you upset by the liberal left celebrating the death of someone?
Of course I am.
Okay.
Well, ladies and gents, probably not any children because you're all at school. You've been listening to Backfire. See you next week. Lord willing, Steve will be back.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again